Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. It is May 12th, 2023. I'm Thomas Vick, joined as always by Seth Wilson of Adler Attorneys. Seth, how are you today?
Thomas, I'm doing great. It's good to see you today on the 12th of May. My goodness, we're rolling toward Memorial Day here pretty quickly, which is always an exciting time of the year here in Indianapolis. So we look forward to all those festivities. And that's a lot of fun for me because I have a son graduating from high school this year
That's
over
right.
Memorial Day weekend. So that'll be a lot of fun. And you've got an announcement for us from, I think you said your brother.
Yeah, on May 18th, there's going to be a Golden Strategies retirement workshop. It's going to be at Aspire, 1499 Windhorst Way, Suite 160 in Greenwood. There's going to be a watch party to kind of talk about some retirement planning strategies. So that's an opportunity for folks. If you want some more information on that, you could get in touch with me, call my office, or send me an email, and I'd be happy to get you in touch with that workshop. But I think some good things will be presented there about how to plan for retirement. So I appreciate you mentioning that,
Yeah, and
Seth.
Yeah, and if you grab that information, if there's a registration link or something, we can put that in the notes for the podcast as well, so folks can just kind of go there and click and grab it. But that it's sort of a nice hand-in-hand fit to what we wanted to chat about today. And as you kind of think about that retirement stage as you're approaching it, and both as you watch maybe your parents go through that. And you had an article on your blog digest called 5 Estate Planning Tips to Protect Parents from Scammers. Thought that was kind of an interesting corollary there. So what are some of those tips that you've seen work well in your practice?
Well, number one is talk about the fact that people are trying to scam elderly folks. There are some stats given in the blog digest about how if you are an elderly individual, you're just much more likely to be targeted by somebody trying to scam you. And so, uh, being open and talking about, hey, this is a danger, you need to be aware. Don't get duped by anybody. Everybody, it seems like everybody gets tricked from time to time on this kind of stuff, but those that are most vulnerable are the elderly, because they don't necessarily report it as much. And if they do get scammed, the average amount of loss seems to be higher than other demographics. So being aware of it and talking about it with elderly folks is really important. And then there are some anti-fraud tools that can be used. I know with my Google Pixel phone, some of the spam calls and spam text messages just automatically get set aside in the junk folder or whatever, or ignored by my call monitoring or what have you. And so there are some phones that can do that, but then also, there's some other apps that you might be able to use to kind of limit the amount of attempts on an elderly individual. So those are a couple things that folks can do. Anything else that you can think of, Seth?
Yeah, a couple things I think of in that, especially as you kind of think about the talking about it process. I would suggest that folks have sort of that red flag response built in. So if they see something they're not quite familiar with, and especially when it's written in such a way that it requires immediate action or attention, have somebody that you can call either in your family or somebody that's a trusted resource to say, I just need a second set of eyes on this. Don't click on anything and don't try to respond to it or get tied up into what's going on there. Usually, if something's coming in, especially electronically like that, with an immediate response required, immediate is already past. So it's not a big deal. And especially with some of the more aggressive things that are out there in terms of the IRS and those kind of things, you're going to get a written correspondence from the official department if there's something to do there. I got one this morning on a text message that told me my Netflix account had been suspended and I need to go in and update my credentials.
Sounds like
I
an
don't have an
emergency,
emergency.
Seth. That's an
That's
emergency.
right.
They'll get you on the emergency sense of
That's
urgency.
right. Yeah, the funny thing is we don't have Netflix, so how could that account be there, right? But your brain starts trying to respond to that of, oh, I did something wrong, or something's wrong with how I did my activity, or I failed to pay a bill. And so those, they prey on your fear and your emotion rather than the logic. And so you kind of have to have that, okay, I see this, it raises some sort of response to me. What am I going to do when I see that, and have that trusted resource out there? You can also go as far as the sort of legal tools that are in place to do that, with either a power of attorney, or relying on the terms of your trust, or even having a guardianship put in place. And this would be more sort of from the sandwich generation perspective, if you're trying to help with your elderly parents, where they're making decisions that they shouldn't make, that aren't in their best interest from a financial perspective, potentially authorizing the power of attorney to step into their shoes to manage some of those things. And or in an extreme case where the power of attorney is not just enough, then to put a guardianship in place to take away that legal liability that can attach for some of those changes or gifts and those kind of things. And I think a couple of the other points there are good as well. Knowing the warning signs, we kind of talked about that of, hey, we're having these conversations. This is what we've experienced. And then the last point I thought was really good, Thomas, is try to avoid shaming someone because they feel like they got duped. We've all been duped. Every one of us has said, oh, I've got to respond to this. Now, you may have caught it before it became a huge problem, but it happens to everyone, even those of us who are kind of in this space and very diligent about it. So any other thoughts on that provisions?
Yeah, I think not shaming your loved ones on that is an important piece. You don't want them to feel more guilty than they already do about the situation. And, your loved one probably is a smart, reasonable person that generally has everything together, and then they get tricked by this kind of thing. That's going to hurt their pride quite a bit. So don't add insult to injury in that situation. The other topic on the blog digest that went out today was about a marital trust. And, coming up in the next couple of years, the estate tax large exemption of $11 million for a single person and $22 million for a married couple, that's going to sunset. And my understanding is that those amounts are going to be cut essentially in half at that time. And so it might be time to kind of start thinking about marital trusts and how that might be a good planning opportunity for folks. So expand on that a little bit, Seth.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting topic for lawyers. And clients are kind of like, what are you talking about? So the concept is really it's a little bit more complicated than a normal revocable living trust that you might have. And I think the idea is really to promote, at least how we plan for it, is we want to promote as much flexibility in your planning documents so that if this change occurs where the federal government lowers the exemption amount, subjecting more of your estate potentially to a taxable scenario, at the time, can we have some discussions with the trustee about how to allocate the different parts of your asset base and make sure that as much of that asset base can pass without getting taxed can, okay? And that's the essence of these types of situations. And there's a lot of moving parts in that analysis, but certainly if the threshold comes down, and right now, if you're going to hit 22 million or so as a married couple, that's a scenario you definitely need to be planning for, because it's not going to go up most likely. It will most likely come down and probably affect more people than less. And that's the idea, is that, the government would like to get some more funds for its coffers. So, make sure you're voting. one way to address that, but also make sure you're planning carefully. And again, what we try to do as we're looking at these plans is we plan for what we know today, but also what we can reasonably anticipate, and try to keep that flexibility in those documents, and then actually forming the documents as necessary to offset into one type of trust and then to another type of trust, typically in these marital situations, that allow the individuals and the family to maximize the use of that exemption. So we could get into more of the specifics of that, but it's a little bit more technical. So that's really kind of the idea, is you're just creating a couple different shares of the estate to maximize the amount that you can pass without being taxed.
Right, right. And the estate taxes, it can be devastating to, family farms and, those that are land rich, but maybe not, don't have as much cash as the value of their land. It can be a difficult thing for folks to deal with. And so it's something that you definitely need to plan for and make sure that if you're in that situation, if you're in the $5 to $10 million range right now, you should be definitely paying attention to what's happening in the news and whether you're going to need to do this kind of marital trust planning for sure. So yeah, I think those are all great points that you brought up there, Seth.
I think that the land piece of this is really important to think about, because you really, typically the desire is to pass the land on to the next generation or your beneficiaries so that they can utilize that land. If it's income producing or what have you, you may be forced to liquidate a portion of that land in order to pay the taxes on that transfer. And so that's one of those things that can really have some unintended consequences if you're not able to shelter those funds appropriately through one of these mechanisms. So it's definitely something to be aware of, and that's a great practical example of where that can really come back to cause some unintended consequences if you haven't planned for it.
For sure, for sure. Well, good stuff today, Seth. Tell everybody how they can get in touch with you.
Appreciate it, Thomas. Hey, we're up here in the heart of Hamilton County, right in downtown Noblesville, Indiana, and you can find us on the web at noblesvilleattorney.com. How about you, Thomas?
All right, my name's Thomas Vick of Vick Law PC. I'm in Greenwood, Indiana, and the best way to get in touch with me is to go to my website, Vick Law PC. Well, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. We'll see you next time.
See you.